Help in Pharmaceuticals in association with Higher Secondary Principals Forum.
A very good day, students. Welcome to the biology session. Today we will start with the chapter Ecosystem from the unit Ecology. So let us see the main definition of this particular term. It means that the living organisms interact with the surroundings. It's nothing but the abiotic and the biotic factors will interact with one another in the surrounding. Ecosystem varies greatly with respect to its sizes. For example, it could be a very small pond to a large forest. Entire biosphere is a global ecosystem. So, biosphere is a complex ecosystem, and in order to study such a complex ecosystem, it is categorized into different categories. So, here we have in the natural habitat, terrestrial ecosystem, we have the aquatic ecosystem, and there are some man-made or artificial ecosystems too. So, terrestrial ecosystem, example, grassland, forest, desert. Similarly here, the next category, we have oceans, lakes. And in the man-made or artificial ecosystem, we have an aquarium or even the crop fields, which will have their own abiotic and biotic factors. Next, ecosystem has a structure and functions too. So, interaction between the biotic and the abiotic components will result in a physical structure. Now, this physical structure is the characteristic of each type of ecosystem. Second, the species composition of an ecosystem is nothing but we identify the different species, maybe the plant species or the animal species, and we enumerate the plant and the animals here in that particular ecosystem. So, that is the species composition. Now, all these species which are present in an ecosystem will be occupying different levels in an ecosystem. These levels are referred to as the strata, and this vertical distribution is referred to as stratification. Components of ecosystem. There are four basic or very fundamental components of ecosystem. We have productivity, decomposition, energy flow, and the nutrient cycling. Now, before coming to each component in detail, let us first have a look at an example of a pond ecosystem and try and understand the abiotic and the biotic factors here in an ecosystem. So, the abiotic factor will be the solar input from the sun. Then you will have the water body, which will have dissolved inorganic as well as the organic salts. There will be soil, rich layer of soil at the bottom of the pond, etc. Coming to the biotic factors, there will be producers. So, basically here the phytoplanktons, there will be some kind of algae, etc., which will act as the producers. We will also have consumers here. So, here in this ecosystem you can see primary consumer, which are the zooplanktons. We have the secondary consumer is the fish here, and finally we have a tertiary consumer here, which is a turtle. So, these are some biotic components. Not to forget the decomposers. Bacteria and fungi will occupy the lowermost region in the pond. Coming to the first component, that is productivity. Now, we know that the basic need of an ecosystem is the solar energy. Productivity is nothing but the amount of organic matter that is synthesized by the trophic levels by each organisms that occupy these levels. Let us come to the definition of primary productivity. It is nothing but the amount of biomass or the organic matter that is produced by the producers. Then we have the secondary productivity. It is nothing but the amount of organic matter that is synthesized by the consumers. So, when it is the term primary, it is related to the producers, and when it is secondary, it is related to the consumers. So, this productivity, the rate of biomass production is given in the form of the biomass, the unit area and the time period. So, here you see the productivity or the rate of biomass that is produced. Then, gross primary productivity is also referred to as the GPP. This is nothing but the total amount of organic matter that is produced during photosynthesis by the plants. So that's referred to as the GPP, or gross primary productivity. Now the plants will utilize most of the energy for its respiration, because that is the major energy requirement for the plants. So minus that will be the net primary productivity, which is referred to as the NPP. So it is the available biomass or the organic matter to the heterotrophs. So in the next, in the food chain, the plants will be eaten up by the consumers and they will get the net primary productivity. Primary productivity depends on various environmental factors, and it also depends on the species of plants that are present in that particular area, plus the nutrients that are available in that area and the photosynthetic capacity of the plants. Similarly, there are two more terms. Gross secondary productivity is nothing but the amount of the total amount of organic matter that is produced by the consumers, and whatever remains after the expenditure, that is maybe for locomotion, the consumer might use that energy for respiration, etc. Whatever remains, the available is referred to as the net secondary productivity. Coming to the next component, that is decomposition. Decomposers play a very important role in the ecosystem. Now, decomposers will be breaking down this complex organic matter into inorganic substances like carbon dioxide, water and nutrients. The complex organic matter could be the dead leaves, the bark of the tree or the branches, the flowers, the remains of the animals, even the fecal matter. So this is the detritus. Decomposition is an aerobic process. It requires a lot of oxygen for it to accelerate, or basically the rate of decomposition is possible because of this aerobic process. Chemical composition of detritus as well as the climatic factors will determine the rate of decomposition. For example, here the first one, lignified wood, wherein lignin is the component here in the wood, and you have chitin which is present in maybe the yeast cell will be having chitin, the cell wall of the yeast. So here the rate of decomposition will be very slow, whereas in some insects which have water soluble substances like sugars or nitrogen, it will be at a very fast rate. Including the moist warm environment will also favor decomposition. If the environment is having a low temperature, if there is no oxygen available, then there will be so slow rate of decomposition in that particular area. Decomposition occurs in series of steps. There are 5 important or major steps in the process of decomposition. We have fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humification and mineralization. Now, out of these 5, the first 3, fragmentation, leaching and catabolism, all occur simultaneously on the detritus. They will act simultaneously. So detritus will be broken down to smaller particles in the presence of detritivores. Now here the detritivores could be the fungi, it could be some dung flies, then there could be some earthworms as well as some millipedes. Second one is leaching. Here the inorganic nutrients which are soluble in water will be going down into the soil. They will percolate down into the soil and they will precipitate out in the form of unavailable salts, which will be not available to the plants. Third one is catabolism. Catabolism is an enzymatic process. So here the bacterial as well as the fungal enzymes will be acting on this particular detritus, which will be converted into simple inorganic substances. Then further, this detritus will be converted into dark colored amorphous substance, which is the humus, in the presence of some microbes. Humus has 3 important characteristics. It is extremely resistant to microbial action. just because it has undergone so many steps of breakdown, here it is resistant to microbial action. Plus, because of that, there will be slow rate of decomposition of the humus. And lastly, it is colloidal in state. It can hold up water 10 times more its weight. Plus, it is a reservoir of nutrients. And finally, we have mineralization, wherein the humus will be further degraded to release the inorganic nutrients into the soil. Then the next one is energy flow. Sun here is the ultimate source of energy. So the solar radiations that come up to the earth, just around 50% or less than 50% is photosynthetically active, which is referred to as the photosynthetically active radiation. So this energy along with carbon dioxide and water will be utilized by the plants, by the photosynthetic or the chemosynthetic bacteria to form the food. Let us have a look at an ecological pyramid here, wherein you can see the producers that are occupying the base of the pyramid. So this is broader and the apex here is narrower. So it forms a pyramid, ecological pyramid. So we have the producers here, and these producers are occupying the first trophic level here. This is the first trophic level which is occupied by the producers. And then you have the primary consumers here. These are the primary consumers. They will be occupying the second trophic level. These are the levels on which the organisms are placed in the ecosystem. Then we have the third one, that is the third trophic level. We have the tertiary consumers at the fourth trophic level. So out of the 50% of or less than 50% PAR photosynthetically active radiations, around 2 to 10% of it, just around 2 to 10% will be taken up by the plants, out of which the herbivores, here you can see the herbivores. Now the herbivore, once it takes up the plant, only 10% of it is transferred. So there will be 10% of the energy flow from this trophic level to the next trophic level. So let's consider here around say 50,000 joules of energy. So 10% of this 50,000 will be 5,000 that will come to the deer. Later on, the secondary consumer, when it consumes the herbivore, again 10% of this 5,000 joules that is taken up by the deer will be taken up to the next trophic level. So here it will be just 500 joules. And at the last, that is at the apex, the last tertiary consumers which are at the topmost level, the topmost predator will get 10% of the 500 joules. So it will be just 50 joules of energy that will go up to the last trophic level. So this is the energy flow which is referred to as the 10% law given by Lindemann. Remember, at the same time there will be loss of heat. At each trophic level, energy will be lost in the form of heat. So here this is an ecological pyramid which shows the producers, the primary consumers, the secondary consumers and the tertiary consumers. Coming to the standing crop, the available mass, biomass, the mass of the living organism at a particular time is referred to as the standing crop. So mass of the living organism, biomass or the number in a unit area is referred to as the standing crop, and it is given or expressed in the terms of fresh or dry weight. Fresh weight is when you just harvest a particular plant and you take the weight, that's the fresh weight, and dry weight is less the moisture. You dry it and maybe after 3 or 4 weeks you take the weight of that particular organism, that's the dry weight. Now as the energy transfers or as the food is taken up by one trophic level to the next, this is referred to as a food chain. So we have the producers, the primary consumers which will be feeding on the producers, the secondary will be feeding on the primary consumers, the tertiary will be feeding on the secondary, and finally not to forget the decomposers here. So this is a food chain. Again, this food chain is divisible into two. We have the grazing food chain and we have the detritus food chain. So here these are some examples of the grazing food chain. In this case, it starts or begins with the producers. Always the grazing food chain will begin with the producers, and the source of energy here will be sun. Next, the detritus food chain. It will begin with the detritivores, and the energy will come from the detritus in the detritus food chain. The DFC or the detritus food chain is connected to the grazing food chain, wherein some of the organisms of the DFC are a prey to GFC just because of the food chains that are connected to one another. Some organisms are omnivores. For example, we have the cockroaches or the crows. Coming to the next, that is the ecological pyramids. Now pyramids, we have just seen an example of an ecological pyramid. These are obtained when the food or the energy relationships between organisms at different trophic levels expressed in the forms of either pyramid of number, pyramid of biomass or energy. Base of the pyramid we have already seen, always occupied by the producers, which is referred to as the first trophic level. Then the apex, the tertiary consumer, which is the topmost carnivore there. Let us have a look at this particular slide, which shows the pyramid of number, shows the pyramid of biomass, and it shows one more pyramid of biomass here. We will have a look at the different shapes in this particular slide. So here in the first case, pyramid of number, example is the grassland ecosystem, wherein you can see here there are around 6 lakhs of species that are 60 lakhs of plant species that are present here, and as we move higher into the trophic level, it is getting reduced. So the tertiary consumer is getting least number of individuals that are present here, and therefore once you draw a shape of that particular ecological pyramid, you will get upright pyramid. So this is referred to as an upright pyramid, wherein the base is broader and the apex is narrower. Coming to the next, that is pyramid of biomass. Here in this case you can see the dry weight. Again the dry weight is getting reduced as we go higher into the trophic level. So again we get a upright pyramid. This is an upright pyramid that is shown. In the last case, here again the pyramid of biomass, we have the standing crop of the phytoplanktons, which is less compared to the zooplanktons which will be feeding on them. So here it is reverse, and therefore you are getting an inverted pyramid in this particular case. So these are the 3 types or 3 shapes of pyramids with respect to number and biomass. Similarly here there is one more example of biomass, pyramid of biomass, an inverted pyramid. You have the phytoplanktons and you have the number of fishes that outnumber the number of phytoplanktons here, and therefore this is also an inverted pyramid. A given organism may occupy more than one trophic level simultaneously. One example here is of a sparrow, wherein it eats or feeds on the seeds and the fruits. It also feeds on the insects, and therefore here it is occupying 2 trophic levels. It can act as a primary consumer as well as the secondary consumer. So most of the ecosystems, the pyramids of number, energy, biomass are always upright. Energy at the lower trophic level is always more than the higher trophic levels in most of the upright pyramids. Here there is an exception. I have taken here pyramid of number. Let's consider a tree as an ecosystem. So you have one tree and there will be some insects, there could be some birds and a squirrel that is occupying that particular ecosystem, and on top you have the larger birds and the snake. So here if you see both the extremes, this one and here, the extremes are narrower, whereas between here the second trophic level is broader. So we get a different shape which is referred to as the spindle pyramid. Ideal pyramid of energy is always upright and cannot be inverted, just because we have seen something called as 10% law. So, when the energy flows from the lower trophic level into the higher trophic level, 10% of energy will be flowing from the lower trophic level to the higher trophic level, and that is why the ideal pyramid will be always upright and cannot be inverted. Coming to the next concept, that is ecological succession. Now, ecological succession is one of the important characteristic of the community, which means that there is a change in the composition as well as the structure in an ecosystem in response to the changing environment. So, basically succession is nothing but one community is replaced by the second is replaced by the third, and so on. So, to start with a succession, there will be one particular species that will invade that particular area, and that species is referred to as the pioneer species. It is referred to as the pioneer. And the last species that will invade that particular area, and there won't be any kind of change irrespective of the other communities coming in there, is referred to as the climax community, which will be a stable community, or you can call it the community in near equilibrium with the environment. So, the pioneer species are the species that are coming first, or they will invade first in that particular area, and the last species to invade is referred to as the climax community. In between the pioneer species and the climax communities, the other species that come in are referred to as the seral communities. They are referred to as the seers, or referred to as the seral communities. Now, in these seral stages, there could be various types of species. There will be different types of plants, different species which will be occupying, then increase in the number of species will be there, plus there will be increase in the biomass. These are some features of the seral stages. So, this succession is a gradual as well as predictable change in the species composition of a given area. Succession is divisible into two types. We have something called as primary succession, and the second one is referred to as the secondary succession. Now, when the succession starts where there were no living organisms, or on a barren rock, or maybe on a cold lava, is referred to as a primary succession. It is the first time the succession occurs in this particular area. The plant species will come up, the seral communities will come up, the pioneer species will come up, and finally you will have the climax community that will be coming up in this particular area. So, this is referred to as the primary succession. Now, here in the primary succession, there will be a barren rock, and therefore it will require some amount of soil formation also, and soil formation will take many years, and therefore a primary succession will take around 1000 years for it to develop into a climax community. So, we have a barren rock here, and the pioneer species, like for example the lichens, will come up because that particular condition is suitable for either the lichens or the mosses to come up and stable and get invaded in that particular area. Then you have the other intermediate species which are referred to as the seral stages. For example, after the lichens die, there will be more matter that will come up in that particular area, and the layers will increase. There will be more organic matter in the area, and this will be a suitable condition for the bryophytes to come and occupy the area. Then you will have some herbs, some grasses that will come and invade. Finally, will be taken up by some shade loving trees, etc. And then you will have a climax community which will not change, which will be a stable community irrespective of the changes that occur here in the seral communities. So, primary succession is taking place at a very slow rate. Then the secondary succession occurs in the areas where the species already existed, where the soil was already present, but due to some kind of natural calamities like floods, or maybe some man-made activities like burning of the forest, etc., the plant species or the animal species have been wiped off from that particular region, and that is the reason why the secondary succession will be little quicker compared to the primary succession. Maybe around 40 to 50 years will be the lifespan of this secondary succession. So, same way you will have the pioneer species that will come up in the soil layer, and here it will be a quick phase wherein they will quickly come and invade here because the soil is already present. Then you will have the bryophytes, then you will have the other species, the herbs, the shrubs, etc. You will have the different cereal communities, and finally you will have the climax community that will come up and invade the area, and there won't be any change here. It will be a stable community. Next, succession, if it takes place in the water, it is referred to as the hydrarch succession. If it takes place in dry condition in the xeric areas, it is referred to as the xerarch succession. Now, both these successions, be it the hydrarch succession or the xerarch succession, will progress towards a mesic state. Now, mesic will be having moderate amount of water. Hydrarch, there will be plenty of water, whereas in xerarch there will be no water at all. So, the species that invade a bare area we have already seen are referred to as the pioneer species. You can see an example here of primary succession that occurs on land, and here it occurs in the water body. So, there will be rocks, lichens, and there will be soil formation after the rocks breakdown or weathering of the rocks occur. You will have the bryophytes, the bigger plants, the climax community, and finally it will move to a mesophytic area. Primary succession that occurs in water, so you will have the water body, there will be phytoplanktons, there will be free floating angiosperms that will come up next, there will be some rooted hydrophytes, rooted plants that will come, you will have the grasses, some trees, and finally there will be a forest. So, even here in this case it will be moving to a moderate water conditions. Coming to the next concept, that is the nutrient cycling. This is one of the important component again with respect to an ecosystem. Nutrient cycling, also referred to as the biogeochemical cycles, just because it involves the biotic factors, it will involve the plant, the organism and the other animals, the land, as well as the inorganic and the organic substances. That is why it is referred to as the biogeochemical cycles. Now, the amount of nutrients which is present in the soil at any given time is referred to as the standing state. It is referred to as the standing state. Nutrients are never lost, they are always recycled indefinitely into the environment back. So, that is the circulation that occurs in the nature. Coming to the function of the reservoir, it is nothing but it will meet the deficit due to the imbalance that is caused because of the influx and the efflux of any kind of nutrient. Certain environmental factors like soil pH, moisture, temperature will regulate the release of these nutrients into the atmosphere. Let us now have a look at the gaseous cycle. The nutrient cycling, you have two types, gaseous cycle. Example is carbon cycle. Now, when we are looking at the carbon cycle, we will have to look at three important components. First is the source of this carbon, then how it is utilized by the living organisms, and how it is getting circulated in nature. So, first of all, let us come to the source. Oceans here will be occupying around 71% of dissolved carbon dioxide. So, this is one major reservoir of carbon. And atmosphere will have around 1% of carbon dioxide. So, the plants will be taking up carbon dioxide, from the atmosphere for the process of photosynthesis. Similarly, the animal will be eating up this particular plant. So, carbon dioxide will be moving from the plants to the animal, and both this plant as well as the animal through a process of respiration will be giving out carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. So, you can see here it is giving out carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, the plant and the animal through a process of respiration. Once the animal and the plant die, the process of decomposition will be giving rise to the formation of fossils. So, there will be fossilization. Once these fossils are extracted out, maybe in the form of oil, coal or gas, through a process of combustion, in case of the automobiles, or maybe through a simple burning of this fossil fuel, again there will be carbon dioxide that will move on to the atmosphere. So this is the way the carbon is getting circulated. Not to forget the oceans. There will be a lot of phytoplanktons in the oceans too. There will be some aquatic organisms too. So this phytoplanktons in the ocean will be taking up carbon dioxide from this reservoir, that is the oceanic reservoir. Whereas here in the terrestrial plants will be taking up carbon dioxide from the atmospheric reservoir. And the aquatic animals that are present through a process of respiration, both as well as the aquatic animals will be back again giving out carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. And here there is a mention of the limestone and the shells, because the limestone will be having calcium carbonate. So once they dissolve, this carbon dioxide will also move into the ocean. Coming to the example of sedimentary cycle, that is phosphorus cycle. Now phosphorus, again the source of phosphorus are rocks. So you will have the rocks here. Once they dissolve or weathering of the rocks, there will be phosphates that will be released. So once they are released, it will come up into the soil. So this is the inorganic form, which will be taken up by the plants. Phosphates from the soil go to the plant. Once an animal feeds on the plant, the same phosphate in inorganic compound form will move on to an animal. Finally, the plants and the animals die. Detritus is formed. You have the detritivores that are present in the soil. Through a process of decomposition, back again phosphates will be released into the soil, which might move into the water body again, and the process of upliftment of rock will continue. So this is the way the phosphorus cycle circulates. We have seen the source and where it is getting utilized by the phosphate will be utilized by the living organisms in the ATP formation of energy. Then you will have the nucleic acids like the DNA and the RNA, there also will require phosphates. So this is the way the phosphorus cycle or the phosphorus circulates in the environment. Coming to the next is the ecosystem services. Now these are the services that are given to the mankind free of cost by the ecosystem through a natural environment, through a healthy ecosystem. We have n number of ecosystem services here which will support the ecosystem. For example, you will have the biodiversity, the photosynthesis, soil formation, food, then there will be clean water that will be provided, there will be fishes, wood, etc., etc. Plus here you can see it will also regulate. There will be purifying of water, there will be clean water that will be provided. Then some other like the cultural services are aesthetic value, recreation, education, etc. So these are the ecosystem services which are free of cost to the mankind. Here conservation of nature is very important so that we can get this ecosystem services continuously to the mankind. Students, now let us discuss some questions on the topic ecosystem. Here give an account of energy flow and ecosystem. You have to discuss in detail the 10% law, the loss of amount of heat, that is from one trophic level to the next. Then you'll have to discuss about the different trophic levels, etc. So give an overall account of energy flow in an ecosystem. Then discuss the carbon cycle and phosphorus cycle in detail. Here you'll have to discuss about the sources in both the cases. Plus you'll have to talk about how the living organisms utilize this particular nutrient, plus how it is getting circulated in nature. Then distinguish between the grazing food chain, the detritus food chain. You speak about the main plants here, the producers which will be starting with that particular food chain, grazing food chain, now the producers, and here detritus will be starting with the food chain, and the amount of energy flow, the source of energy. Then there is an application question. If the producers produce 9,000 joules of energy, calculate the energy of the primary consumers and the secondary consumers occupying the next two trophic levels. So you'll have to use the 10% law for this particular question. Next is discuss the components of an ecosystem. We'll have to discuss the components for maybe 4 marks, discuss giving some examples here. Next, give an account of the process of decomposition in detail, you will have to speak about the definition of decomposition and come to all the 5 steps of decomposition, that is the fragmentation, leaching, the catabolism, the humification as well as the mineralization, how the nutrients are released into the soil which will be available to the living organisms. Then you will have the next one, explain the upright pyramid and the inverted pyramid giving examples. We have seen some examples during the start. The upright pyramid, you can give the example of pyramid of number. You can specify that particular example in detail and explain the upright and the inverted pyramid giving examples. Next is differentiate between the primary productivity and the secondary productivity. Here also give the definition of primary productivity, the secondary productivity, and discuss in detail. Give 2 points here of differentiating. Next, define the standing crop, and you have to define what is a standing crop and standing state. Next, describe the pyramid of number giving a suitable example. Here you can discuss again giving an example of a ecosystem, maybe a grassland ecosystem, or you can give an example of a tree, that ecosystem that we had taken up, and you can discuss the shape of this particular pyramid. Plus you will have to go through the biology questions from the Goa board question papers also, so that you will get more practice, solve the questions and be prepared with this particular chapter, that is ecosystem. Thank you.
Prudent Scholars, powered by Lupin Pharmaceuticals.